Hi, friends. I'm Heidi S. Howard. I'm the artistic director at Seven Stages. And I found myself in this place showing up in 1999, afraid of commitment. And it was the people and the artists and the work that we did that kept me here. So, here, even in this virtual stage, we are gathered in fierce community and doing what we do best. These two artists that I'm joined with, Tim Miller and Scott Turner Schofield, um, are two that I actually call friends because I believe we have grown together and each of them have honestly changed the fabric within me to carry the torch of social justice and telling stories. So I'm just going to set the stage, virtual stage, shall we say. So Tim Miller, I'm going to read for a moment, but Tim Miller is one of the most important figures in American performance art. I truly believe this. He co founded Performance Space 122 in New York and Highways Performance Space in Santa Monica, two of the most influential alternative performance venues in the country. His work for 4 decades has explored gay identity, the body, AIDS, immigration, and marriage equality through intensely personal and politically charged solo performances. In 1990, Miller was one of the NEA Four, alongside Karen Finley, Holly Hughes, and John Fleck, whose National Endowment for the Arts grants were overturned under pressure from the Bush White House because of gay content and obscene performance art. They all used the nude bodies to tell stories of identity and possibility. They sued the federal government with the ACLU's support, won a settlement, but ultimately lost the broader constitutional case when the Supreme Court ruled 8-1 in 1998 that general standards of decency could be applied to arts funding. Our founders, Del Hamilton and Faye Allen, took that and ran, perhaps in their own form of protest, producing them all in the early 2000s. Just about that time, I did show up with my baby stage manager hat on. And I had the honor and privilege of being the stage manager and in space and conversation and courage. Tim Miller first produced at Seven Stages his piece Shirts and Skin in 1998. Karen Finley came shortly after in 1998, as well as Annie Sprinkle in 1999. And then, of course, Tim Miller returned with us in 2003, and then Lay of the Lands in 2011. Ah, wow, those pieces I just are the pieces among so many other courageous stories that Dell and Faye brought, uplifting LGBTQ plus rights, uh, among others. So it's literally this work which keeps the fire in my totos to keep on running with the work that we do. So around that time, Scott Turner Schofield and I became close friends as he was finding his own coming out stories, as well as I was finding my own coming out stories, building the education program. We ended up teaching together and developing programming together in college campuses as well as on the stage at Seven Stages. He really helped me form the possibility of creating brave and safe spaces for our young people to come out. Um, Sometimes there was even emergency phone calls to my friend Scott when there was like real fear of suicide and facing parents and authority of these young people finding their identities because they were going through an artistic process that gave them courage. So we first produced, we were a co-commissioner of his new work while we're here in 2008. And so that piece graced our stage, and we continue to support it through its growth. So here I'm reading again. Scott Turner Schofield is an Emmy nominated actor, pioneering trans performer, and award winning storyteller. He made history as the first trans actor in daytime television on The Bold and the Beautiful, and the first out trans man nominated for a daytime Emmy. His trilogy of solo performances, which we did all of them at Seven Stages, Underground Transit, debutante balls, and becoming a man in 127 easy steps. All right, I'll give out the. He has toured internationally for over 2 decades using autobiography humor and the body to tell trans stories before the mainstream was ready for them. Scott's Underground Transit was censored in 2006 for nudity. Becoming a Man in 127 Easy Steps was censored in 2010 for nudity. He has described the ongoing challenge of getting venues to program his work at all. He later served as artistic director of Out North Contemporary Art House in Anchorage, Alaska, the same organization Tim Miller specifically named as under the gun in his 1998 Supreme Court dispatch, and accepted the ACLU award on their behalf for surviving 9 censorship attacks over 25 years. So together, we have done these things. We have grown for over 2 decades, Scott and I, and Mac at 7 Stages, and then with the support and love and courage of Del Hamilton and Faye Allen at 7 Stages, bringing Tim in those days. And so I just want to circle back around to those early courageous days, Tim, of finding yourself facing the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, who continue to rescind things to this day, and how this mentorship and this collaboration and family has come to be.
I'll dive in. Well, it's what's really struck me right now, and I just finished a project with the ACLU, yet another one, with I mean, the NEA, of course, almost doesn't exist anymore. It's their wet dream of 1990 has been accomplished, of destroying cultural life in our country. And specifically, the attack started now, not surprisingly, with a direct attack on trans artists, with the so-called banning all gender ideology. It demands air quotes. It's so ridiculous. And so those first 4 organizations that were defunded a year ago now, this month, was such a clear, obvious, NEA 4, yet another NEA 4, but now it's really the NEA 4000, because virtually every arts organization was defunded a couple months later, got their letters saying, that's all, folks. So like so many things in the culture war, it occurs to me, and also the war on queer people, they're repetitive, they come back for seconds, but they also get worse. And certainly right now, the overt violence, both on a cultural level and on a direct human level against trans folk, which clearly is, as Scott and I were kind of on our email chain talking, messaging about a little bit. Clearly, all those attacks on garden variety, lesbians and gay men is now really laser focused on an attack on trans embodiment, on trans agency, on trans citizenship, and I'm sure we're all struck by this nightmare in Kansas a few days ago of demanding all trans Kansans. And I'm from a Kansas family, so anytime Kansas shows up, I got skin in the game somehow. It's just so violent and mean and ugly and stupid, making people go return their driver's licenses. So that's why most recently it felt like it was important to use our experience in the 90s of the culture war and our Supreme Court case to connect with these 4 organizations, especially the National Queer Theater in New York, and also the Theater Offensive, who both Scott and I were presented by, and another shared National Performance Network kind of venue. So more skin in the game, kind of a space that they probably produced me not as many times as 7 Stages, but close probably. So that kind of, it felt like over the last year to really reconnect what we learned in the culture wars and the political wars against queer people over the last 30 years, connecting with these younger arts organizations, or a arts organization that's been around a long time, but with new leadership, like the Theater Offensive in Boston. It felt really purposeful, and it's been really interesting, and just to see what our experience in a much more modest culture war, because the situation we're in now is way, way worse to me. But I also am finding just their resiliency, especially the National Queer Theater in New York, I think is just such a lively, amazing LGBTQ plus arts organization, and I love the boldness of their name. Just we're the National Queer Theater. Take that. So to me, that's been one of the most, I haven't wanted to really redredge what now almost seems like the quaint culture war of the 90s of four very accomplished, prominent artists. We were all already touring all over the country. We weren't 20 years old, but really the meanness and the intensity and the mass destruction of all these arts organizations now that got their letters at some point. And who knows, much like the Kennedy Center, destroyed, silenced, dark, no, not even a ghost light ultimately. So that's kind of the space I've been occupying, is really to want to, as much as we can, kind of in looking at that period, and also in looking at my immigration stuff, which has been a huge subject for me, of all these green card interviews, citizenship interviews, citizenship ritual, all the spaces that are now ICE ambushes, people doing it the right way. These spaces that I've performed literally thousands of times are the embattled spaces where when Alistair and I were being interviewed for a green card through marriage, unlike in 2013 when we got him his green card, now people are getting abducted out of their green card interview, dragged from their, which is what the nightmare narrative in that piece, which I did at least once at 7 Stages, Glory Box. So it's kind of finding just the ways that this echo and this current catastrophe we're in, to keep just using where we've been to kind of embolden us for right now. That's my general opening thoughts. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking so much about what are the echoes, right? Where is history rhyming right now, right? And it's so funny because I feel this pushback from time to time and I think it's really just transphobia, where people don't want their specific what happened to them to be equated in any way to what's happening to trans people right now. But you brought up immigration, and the idea that any body could be illegal, right, is like a key part of the foundation of what's going on for trans people. And it might seem like an abstract connection, but to me it's very clear. And then when I think historically too, like the panic over AIDS in the 80s and 90s really functioned as this way to code gay people as diseased, dangerous, a threat to children and families. Like that was all very much pushed, right? The mechanism was to, identify the vulnerable or stigmatized aspect of the community's existence, then amplify it with moral panic, and use that panic to then justify legal and cultural suppression. And look, I was a kid when that was happening, right? So it wasn't like happening consciously to me, right? But that's what your work was responding to, Tim. And that's, my way into doing this work specifically was getting a copy of O Solo Homo in the very first queer and trans literature class that Emory ever did, right? And reading it and going, oh, like this is where I fit into this world. Because as a trans youth at the time, I wasn't, they couldn't cast me in Ibsen. Do you know what I mean? In their very traditional work, because of my embodiment itself was so different. And so to find a way in through the body, through Tim's work, and I thought too, I was thinking about how, your lore, of going to New York at 19 to work with Merce Cunningham, right? And for me, I went to New York at 19 to work for Holly Hughes, right? So there's this beautiful kind of overlap that happened. And then to do my own work, to experience being censored and have no one come to my aid. Literally people just said, well, what do you expect? You're trans, like, and you're taking off your shirt, and you know what I mean? Like that you're getting naked on stage, and it sort of seemed like that I should have expected it, and that it sort of excused in that way, right? But then we move forward to just these last few years, and this constructed term, gender ideology, which if you look it up, was invented by the Vatican as a way of pushing back against feminism, and as well as queer and trans people. This panic works identically to the AIDS panic that was manufactured as well, right? Like trans bodies, trans healthcare, trans children, right? The same stigmatized community, the same family danger framing, the same moral panic, all in service of the goal of making the community seem illegitimate, make our stories untellable, make our existence a problem to be eradicated rather than a life just to be lived and explored artistically, right? So to me, like, I mean, I want to talk about both. I want to talk about like the personal experience of censorship, and because I know it wasn't all just like taking that powerful picture in front of the Supreme Court. Like there is a human cost to it, right? But at the same time, I love that Seven Stages is bringing our work together in this way, because I think our work is the counter argument to all of it, right? It is putting the fact of our lives out in the world in a way that is not possible to argue with. And when people know your story, they feel pretty good about you, right? Like I've never had someone walk away from my story like hating me still. They might be confused, but not hating me. And that's what fascists are afraid of, right? They're afraid of empathy because empathy destroys fascism, and our work creates empathy. And I'm so proud to be in that with you, in this way, and to still be in it. That's the reason itself, right? But I am curious, Tim, like when this all happened to you at 31, what like how did it like impact you personally, this censorship?
Well, it was such a and I think I was on my way to North Carolina. I think I'm wearing a North Carolina School of the Arts shirt right now. One my favorite, Fighting Pickles for the School of the Arts. So cute. I was on my way to North Carolina, and in my long intense connection to the Southeast, where I work more than any other part of the country, and got a heads up at the alternate routes meeting that the shit was about to hit the fan. But for me at that point, we had already done the largest artist civil disobedience action in American history in Los Angeles. The art criminal chain gang, hundreds and hundreds of artists, blockaded Department of Homeland Security, shut the building down for a day. Dozens of artists were arrested. The largest civil disobedience artist action. The next biggest is Buffalo at Art Park the next year. But for me, it was, in some ways I was expecting this. It wasn't surprising me, not in the way that you're talking, that sort of policing. Oh, what do you expect? Of course, you're going to be censored, which is so diminishing and abdicating any responsibility too, like, almost saying you got what you deserved. But still, it didn't surprise me with the kind of work I was doing, and that I was going to be facing some of these difficulties. But it was on just every other level, and it's back to that pathogenic kind of thing you were getting at, the way the queer body in the 90s was so seen as the diseased body, like something to infect the heteronormative family unit, much like the way the trans panic that exists now, or volleyball teams everywhere at risk, kind of the sports wedge that's been unfortunately has worked. It's been effective, just like people being afraid that their gay friends are going to get them sick and die was also worked. And we had to vote on whether we were going to have concentration camps for people with HIV in the late 80s in California. It was roundly defeated, but the fact that we had to spend millions of dollars to defeat such that it could get the votes to be put on the statewide ballot was not cheerful. But my urgency at that point was so much around whether I was going to survive or whether I had HIV, which I assumed I did, though I did not. When the NEA stuff hit, I hadn't been tested. But the urgency that was going on in the queer community at that point was so intense, literally funerals every week in LA and New York for me, that what was going on, the NEA stuff was obviously stressful and scary and death threats and blah, blah, blah. But I was already under a death threat by the genocidal impulse of Reagan Bush, who did everything possible to spread AIDS widely, which, in all honesty, and it's not revisionism, that was my core worry, concern, thing that kept me up in the middle of the night, not Jesse Helms and the National Endowment for the Arts. So in some ways, it made me a useful, happy warrior to use all my ACT UP connectivity. And because I tour so much, I knew ACT UP Atlanta, and remember our big ACT UP action in Atlanta at the Southeast Arts thing. The most I've yelled in my entire life at the head of the NEA at some big hotel downtown Atlanta. I had all these links from all my touring, so I was a useful traveling cheerleader for ACT UP and for AIDS activism, which was my priority at that point. So it didn't mean I wasn't also really focused as an artistic director of an arts organization that had just opened, and Highways and PS Performance Space 122, now Performance Space New York, which is a fine rebrand, I think. Were the two of the most attacked arts organizations, and I was the only artist that was also an artistic director, which made things more complicated, as you experience later as at Out North too. It's suddenly that dual hat makes things even more complicated. So that was my experience, was how do we use all the skills we've honed from several years of direct action AIDS activism with ACT UP, AIDS Coalition Unleash Power. That in LA, Highways and ACT UP were virtually the same organization. We were in complete solidarity and showed up at each other's intersectional action. So it was very helpful. So that my kind of activist hat really helped around AIDS activism, really helped me deal with what was going on in the culture war, which also made it never seem as bad as hundreds of thousands of gay Americans being killed by our government. Because it wasn't as bad. It was bad and it sucked, but it never troubled me in the way that my own looming demise, as I really thought, and I didn't get tested till after the NEA4 stuff and found I was negative. So it sort of had shifted the trauma levels for it. Not that it wasn't stressful for me, but it made me, I think, quite an effective. Slightly almost disinterested in my own Supreme Court case, just to be able to use all the activism, use all my national touring to go raise money, raise awareness, organize. I tour if there was a national action. I'd be performing at Diverse Works during the Republican National Convention because everybody in ACT UP was there, and my performances were fundraisers for people to be there and pay for the plane tickets. So that all kind of worked together. But I know I was the most involved with AIDS activism, direct action activism, both in ACT UP New York and ACT UP LA. So that kind of gave me solidarity troops to feel connected to.
And I feel that way too, especially now that Becoming a Man in 127 Easy Steps is a film, it's much easier for it to go out there. Right. So, we're showing the film at 7 stages. There's a whole national movement afoot to show it for exactly the same reasons, to raise funds for direct action trans activism work, right? Which feels really great because part of the whole thing of being a solo performer for me was like I can't be everywhere all at once, and it's given the dire state of arts funding now. I mean, you wouldn't think that solo performance would be so expensive, but there's no money, right? So showing a film is even easier than that, right? So I'm glad at least it exists in that way. It's some things that came up with what you were saying was just this idea of all the solidarity, and it just means so much to me to hear you actually say like it's much worse now, and to feel that connection across time and that support from you, because I have to say, like, the gay and lesbian community is not showing up for trans people right now. And so to just have that again is like, okay, thank you. Like, it is as bad as I think, because it can get in your head, right? It's like, am I crazy? Is this is this actually happening, or am I making it all up, right? So thank you for saying that. And I wish, what I hope is that people start to really realize that this is a fight for all of us. If they can criminalize our bodies, you don't think they're going to stop with just us, right? Like, they've tried it on you. They tried it on you already, and they're going to circle back. They're not creative, in that way.
Right. They're persistent though. Like, it's the retooling this and they really feel like they're they've scored major wedge political points attacking trans people, because they realize even left of center progressive non-queer people are actually easily swayed by the sports argument and the bathroom art. It's why the two main tacks they've taken have been unnervingly successful. They have worked with people we would expect them not to work with,
Well, and that was
including
focused. That
lesbians
was
and
by
gay men.
design.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
exactly. It's all by design. I mean, I was talking with a friend at Lambda Legal who is, getting pushback from some of their biggest gay donors, saying, "Well, I don't know that we should be doing this trans stuff. It seems awfully polarizing." Right? You know, I wonder, Heidi, obviously Seven Stages isn't going anywhere with this, but what's the tenor like in the arts programming world around trans versus queer versus none of the above?
Well, I learned from my predecessors to not pay attention and to do what we got to do and tell the story, right? So, Atlanta's really interesting in being siloed and looking awesome on stage in the theater community, and then there's the dance community, and then there's the film community, and we tend to break the rules regardless. In doing all of those things. I mean, Scott, you introduced me to Sean Dorsey dance over more than a decade ago, and we've now commissioned our fifth piece with them. So I get are you doing dance? Oh, now you're what? So I'm just I'm in the fight to tell the story. As far as there is a they're not so new now, but there's out front theater community. Out front theater
Mhm.
is solely producing queer arts, and they stick to the gay story and narrative. And then there's some of the other traditional arts that have like kind of flowed, but I honestly don't see much trans work being produced here locally.
Mhm.
As far as being a part of the National Performance Network, they're always torch bearers and really pushing for folks to be supported. So yeah, I'm just pulling out all of the pennies so that the stories can be told and we keep the fight in representing all of us because we can't exist without all of us, right? I
Mhm.
mean, Tim and I have been trying to make what's actually going to happen in just 2 weeks.
Less than that,
Happen,
even.
by thinking creatively and really like using resources that we're able to figure out how to make the story happen where it needs to happen. And then bringing in the other partners that are doing the good work. Like we're working with Positive Impact Atlanta and coming out during the weekend of showing this piece and giving resources. So I'll be on the street saying, get your condoms and testing and maybe also have an open mic and share your own story. So it's just like really thinking outside of the box on how we produce this work so more stories can be told and empathy built and brave and safe spaces to be courageous. I mean, Tim, you've worked with youth your whole career and I take that like to true heart. If we're not offering these spaces for our young people to tell their story, then our elders are, how we're connecting across generations to find that courage and continue to fight the good fight.
Which is one of those resources that the University of Alabama and Auburn got me flying into Atlanta, which made it easy, where I'll be working with, 18 to 21-year-olds at Auburn and University of Alabama, Birmingham. So that's also another good collaboration, because meant we didn't have to deal with a plane ticket. I was already flying into Atlanta so that we could kind of concoct our plan.
And
Scott,
that's
one thing that really struck me is, along with the incredible loss, any kind of shutting down of trans culture, of course, obviously is hard and bad and awful and disempowering to, trans youth. But I think it's also bad for everybody. I think it's bad for cisgendered straight men. I think it's bad for cisgendered queer men. I feel like I've learned so much about becoming a man, whether it's your piece 100 with 127 Easy Steps or Aaron Raz Link's amazing trans memoir. I never remember titles. I think what becomes you, what becomes him. You know, the chapter in that about describing the first weeks of being on testosterone were one of the most revelatory, as a trans man, most revelatory things I've ever read that helped disclose my own cisgender male identity. You know, which, you know, in suddenly light bulbs went on for me too. Oh, that's that feeling of running my hands over a rosemary hedge or something. So to not have those voices is to shut down and limit everybody's engagement, which is, it's not just a loss for trans folk, it's a loss for everybody. And that's partly my passion, which has existed for decades. Highways did, I am told, the first international trans performance festival in the world with Kate Bornstein and David Harrison. That made it international. And a couple of other people. I forget who else was in it, but it was the first gathering of like just, you know, this incredible explosion of trans culture, which to me is the most lively, energized corner of LGBTQIA cultural representation now. It's just where the action is. Partly it's because where the battle is, and it's where who's getting beat up right now. Just as AIDS, you know, the war around, you know, HIV/AIDS was the front line in the 90s, 80s and 90s, because that's who was being hassled. So to me, it's you know, it's the right thing to do, of course, to advocate for trans, you know, trans people's lives, trans people's art. And I mercifully don't run a space anymore, but you know, mentor younger trans performers and stuff, and all the time, and in various settings. But it's also in all our interests to make, especially as we have this creature in the regime White House destroying young men's lives, future, sense of themselves, this absolute being injected with this poison of the worst kind of toxic masculinity. All the alternatives of that, whether, you know, and I, you know, hear this from non-gay young men I work with all the time. Gosh, Tim, so great to work with a gay man. It feels like it really opens up, you know, my sense of myself too, though I'm not gay.
Which is, not gay black.
Which is sort of what I just was saying. But I think anytime we tip our hat that we learn something from somebody else is such a good thing. To me, it's, and of course, what the fascist impulse wants to shut down, that empathy, wanting to limit the empathy potential we have.
I mean, I'll never forget. It was a Seven Stages show. We were doing 127 at Seven Stages, and something had happened. Like the shows got sold out, and there was just this great buzz. We extended several times, and it got on the radio. You know, they were like, "This show keeps being extended," and I you know, there's the opening moment of the live performance. I come out of this cocoon of fabric, so I've been in there all along, and I jump down, and it's my first view of the audience, and I see this group of guys that I clock very quickly as cisgender heterosexual men. Like I'm just like, wait, who's that group? And there's this like energy to them. They're like ready to, they're like laughing at everything I'm saying, and I'm just like, what is happening? You know, so totally confused. But we have a great show. And at the end, I would, instead of taking a bow, I would stand at the door, and as everybody filed out, I would shake their hands and say thank you, because that's what you're supposed to do as a man. Look people in the eye, shake hands firmly, say thank you, right? So everybody leaves, and these dudes show up, and the leader of them, he's like, "This was not at all what we thought this was going to be." I was like, "What did you think this was going to be?" And he's like, well, the title of it, you know, we thought it was like, you know, the redneck plumber tour, right? Like they thought it was some like straight guy comedy event, and they ended up in a transgender performance art piece. It was just so good. But the conversation that I had with this guy, right, with this total bro, he was so energized and enlivened, and the reflection, I mean, just like you said about you know, having things revealed to you about your own masculinity by watching or by reading a trans man's story, right? Like the same thing happened for this guy, and we were able to connect in this way that to this day, it blows my mind. And to think that like that's really what my agenda was. Like my only agenda was to just connect in that kind of way, to have somebody leave having had a really good night, totally unexpected, really fun time where they felt something new about themselves and could leave feeling good about themselves and a group of people that they never knew existed before. That's the agenda. What's the problem here? you know it's
I mean, ultimately, that's what we're all trying to do is find the empathy of how people actually can connect. And that's with our black and brown communities, with ACE and the immigration and the list goes on what, soapbox we're going to get on in that day. And each of you continue to use the power of storytelling to do that. So what about these pieces right now? In a couple of weeks, we're here at Seven Stages again. We've had a love fest in this conversation, but like, what in Atlanta? Who do I need to put on my list right now to start calling and make sure they're there so that these talking points and these young people have the power to continue to take the torch that you all have passed on to each other through the work?
Well, Body in the O, which is kind of sections from different performances and brand new stuff from my most recent book about A Body in the O, referring to the the O in the Hollywood sign, which is my image for the show of me when I climbed up in it in my early 20s. And fortunately did not break my neck. You're not supposed to climb up the letters. But it's the Shakespeare call to like the O, the wooden O, what the Globe Playhouse was called and looked like from above of, when Shakespeare asks us, we need to take the big themes of our times, the giant issues, the giant if we're going to do stuff in the wooden O on stage to make big stuff happen. And so that's kind of my embarkation in this piece. But the structure of this piece is really about queer agency and immigration. It's the main stories are the day the Supreme Court overturned the Defense of Marriage Act and the day Alistair and I got married in New York City, and all the spaces we occupied, the spaces that I was just talking about that are being shut down, policed, people kidnapped, abducted by masked Trump Gestapo at their marriage ceremonies, at their marriage interviews at Department of Homeland Security. So I'm actually, the piece really begins at the Department of Homeland Security. So I think, for me, and I, not that I'm without worry that being married to a naturalized citizen, I don't think any of us are safe. I don't think native-born citizens are safe. But they're saying that they don't really respect citizenship, including not just naturalized citizenship of people who become citizens, but people who were born here. People, like me, the last family member I can notice came, I think, in 1682, to North America. It's like we've been here a long time. Did a show about that. But for me right now to be doing stuff that is performing the spaces that ICE is now invading, which, it's been a major subject for me for a long time. I've had this anxiety about all these Department of Homeland Security encounters Alistair had to go to for 20 years. That now people are being abducted out of these very bureaucratic interviews, citizenship swearing-ins, is pretty awful. So I sort of think anybody coming, it's a way to really understand, especially every time that someone who's there to having done everything right, which they always talk about. Well, we want to support immigrants that did it all right. They want to get rid of all of them, all of us. So to perform a space where we're doing it right. And now I've kind of shifted the space to think about, okay, this is where these people are being, at the end of their marriage interview, when they think they're going to get their green card, they're hustled into a locked facility and sent to Louisiana to some detention center. So I think the piece is funny and lively and juicy, and I'm changing stuff to respond to what has been going on for the last year. But it's a real testament to what we can make happen in the theater, which is we can't do everything and we can't fix all the world's ills, but I still have this faith that we can do a lot. We can make a ton happen, much like those that story of that engagement that Scott just talked about, or which was making me think of a performance in Lubbock, Texas, when there were like 20 people in military uniform who I thought were going to kill me at the end of the show, because I rarely have so many people in military fatigues in an audience, even at schools with an ROTC, and they all lingered to talk to me. And what they wanted to talk to me about was what advice I could give them when they're in active service of how to implement the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So all my worries about what was going to happen was the opposite. They had come to the performance to get a better sense of what they, as future Reserve Officer Training Corps, could tell us. So those moments like that, and a little glimpse of both Scott and I, what happens if you talk to people at the end of the performance, which to me is essential, and I always do it. I like to sell books at the end too, which means you're out there. But those are the kind of, those moments of transformation, of change, also for ourselves, for me to think, I've never had so many active military in a performance in uniform. So it was, and I haven't had so many since then. My own stereotyping of who these people were, these young women and men. And now, of course, the military being yet another one of the front lines of the attack on trans embodiment and trans soldiers, which is, the long list of just horrors of the last year. But I think that, within all this, and it's why I like that I'm doing a show called A Body in the Ego, which is that belief in that wooden O, that we can make major shit happen, that we can stir it up in big ways, the way it's amplified through press and through TikTok and YouTube channel stuff and all, for me, books are really important. I almost every day get an email from some young queer or non-queer person saying, pick up your book at some little college in Kansas, back to Kansas. We're reading your stories, help me so much, kind of by whatever means necessary to amplify our stories. But the theater still feels like an essential space to be in IRL, shared locus time with each other seems super important. Yeah. So that would be my hope. Just as we, as I check back in, probably for the 10th or 11th show I've done at 7 Stages, I really need to look through all my stuff. It's at least 9. But then I keep finding a new one. And actually the first one was 1988, Heidi. Wow. Some Golden States was 19, I think you said 1998, but it's even kind of thrown further back than that, like to the, was long before the NEA stuff.
Yeah. I keep trying to do the timeline. Like I want to in the lobby have a but it's been too long, and it really is necessary to like continue these relationships. I started to say that partnerships are essential, like how you're getting here now, and the friendships remaining and the contacts. It might have even been years since we have connected, but it is okay to pick up the phone and call folks from our history,
right,
and our hopeful future to make these ways possible, to think outside of the box, just to even create conversations like this.
Well, and then our conversation got bigger once Scott was involved, and now it's a bigger idea. And Scott, you're in LA right now, right?
I'm actually in Toronto.
Oh, okay. But you still live in LA, don't you?
Moved to Toronto.
Oh, I don't think I even knew that. Wow. So
no, it's a recent development.
Are you becoming a Canadian?
Yeah, my father was Canadian, so I have.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's
you have a Canadian passport already, or you could get it easily.
Yeah, it's all in process, but
wow,
that's and it was a struggle. It was a real struggle to decide, like, after all the activism that I've done and all the work that I've done, am I really gonna leave? And it all came. Maybe I should write a very Tim Miller-esque show about this.
There is a show in this to do, I think, for sure.
100%. but I was texting with a friend the day before the election, and I said, I had so much panic around it, and I had been going around the country all of 2024, and I was very clear that Trump was going to win. It was not even a question to me, for all of the hopeful feelings that all my friends had. I was like, if you leave any city within 10 minutes of leaving the bounds of the city, you see Trump signs everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
this is happening. And to calm my nervous system about that, I just started making lists and started decluttering and getting rid of things and figuring, making a plan if I had to use it. And as I was writing that, I realized this is what an abused person does to get out
Mm,
of an abusive
right.
relationship. And then I was kind of went back in time, and I thought, my first experience with my queerness crushing up against the American system, I was a child. I was, a teenager when Angels in America came to Charlotte, North Carolina, and was censored, or they tried to censor it. And the show went on without censorship, but then the county took all of the money from all of the arts. They canceled after school programs for youth and the symphony. And a Democrat on the county council said during the televised statement, I think all homosexuals should be pushed off the face of earth. Like that. And this was right around the time that all of this was happening for you, Tim. This was in 1995,
No,
6.
I work in North Carolina. So when Mecklenburg County did that, I know my counties in North Carolina. It was just,
Yeah.
it was the worst thing really that happened in that period, that we're going to just get rid of all culture in an
Right.
extremely important city, the center of banking in the United States after New
Right.
York City. It was so that they thought they could do that, and they did get away with it. Banks kept moving there. It didn't. It's a really important moment in the culture war when that production of Angels made that
It really
happen.
was. And there I was, this queer teenager. I didn't quite know I was trans yet. I was like, do all lesbians think they're men? That was where I was in my state of things. But I knew that they were against me. Like the arrow into my, as a teenager, that's everything is about you, right? Like that's your developmental phase. And it was devastating. I mean, that was the first time I attempted suicide as a teenager, was indirect because of that, because of hearing those government officials saying those things. And they know this now, which is why they keep doing it. They won't stop. It's because they mean it. They want us. This
Right.
is the genocidal, people roll their eyes when you say genocide, but it's like, no, they want us to kill ourselves, right? Like that's they want us to do the job for them, right? And I just kind of tracked my whole trajectory, of course, like that is what started everything I did. And lucky for me, I met you and had the influence of your work. And lucky for me, there were places like Seven Stages, right? And lucky for me that I've had the fortitude and the rage and the fuel to keep going. But as somebody who wants to keep going, and when I was looking at Project 2025, and I realized they wrote it down. They're equating being trans with pornography, and they're saying they want us to, it's one of their checklist goals, that they want to call us all sex offenders. They want to register us, right? And in my book, taking from the Millerian lineage, I have this beautiful picture of myself naked with the letter that I had to get from a doctor saying that I had gender identity disorder, and that transition was the way to cure my illness, right? And it's this beautiful picture. It's art, as art is art. You know what I mean? And it was the second thing that got me censored by the Tampa Bay Performing Arts Center. They said 45 minutes before the show that I couldn't do that bit, right? So I realized if I wanted to keep telling stories, I was, I was going to be, I knew if Trump got in, I was going to be paralyzed with rage, paralyzed, because I was already having nightmares of being buried alive and torn apart by a mob, like horrible things like that, just as like the response to how activism was happening. I would do just simple trans 101 workshops and suddenly be met with this like barrage of hate over Zoom. So I just kind of felt the way that the country was going, and I realized like I have to give myself a chance, simply because I have the privilege of having this dual citizenship. I have to give myself the opportunity to be able to continue telling stories about this time, right? I mean, I think about the Bertolt Brecht mural on the outside of the seven stages, right? Like, will they be singing in the dark time? Yes, there will be singing about the dark times. And if I was going to be able to sing about this time, I needed to get out. And that, it's a fraught decision for me still. I still struggle with it, but I was able to finish the film. I've been able to get it out there. I'm able to continue to be in the conversation and to support in the ways that I
Right.
can. So I think it was the right choice.
Boy, there is an amazing piece in it, of course, and also Canada is the historical, cultural destination for 2 centuries of the Underground Railroad, of all kinds of other, protest movements, Black people fleeing Jim Crow, a million Americans during Vietnam. I mean, we just, I'm so obsessed with Canada. My show Us is really about Canada. But I was so aware, I assumed as a little boy that I would seek asylum in Canada to avoid being sent to Vietnam. So it's a really rich space to occupy. I was just, being married to an Australian, we keeping our options open. Now an American citizen among other citizenships Alistair has. But at a New Year's Eve party in Australia, I was talking to a guy who had just renounced his U.S. citizenship, which I had never had that conversation with anybody before. And in some ways, it's sort of, because I'm still partly, there are positive strands of our incredibly fucked up nation that I want to kind of nurture. So I really kind of stayed with him because I really wanted to hear what the experience was about, just because I'd never heard anybody tell the story. And they make it very difficult for you to renounce your U.S. citizenship. Partly they can't believe you want to do it, which to me is also a really interesting story to hear. But I think right now it's very useful for Americans to hear about Rosie. But Rosie O'Donnell has been the one taking all the flack on this, with having fled to Ireland. And I feel like those stories are super important, as they were during the war in Vietnam, as they were during, 100 years of human slavery, when people began fleeing to Canada, and it was an effective way to like escape from the nightmare of the United States. So it's a rich history to keep tapping into. I don't. You haven't even been that too public about it, the Canada thing, because I haven't really noticed like
No,
posted about it.
yeah, I kind of, like I said, it's a real struggle. It's like, I'm not a quitter. And
Right.
and it's hard for me to have left my people behind, the people, everybody I care about who's still going through this, right? And now I'm sitting watching it happen. And, at the time when I did it, it felt, it was a survival. It was fight for,
Yeah.
fight, or, and it was flight for me. I had to. And still, it's not an uncomplicated thing. I'm not crowing about it. I'm,
Right.
I think I'm always going to have, to question, but at the same time, the mantra for me is like, trans survival is
Yeah.
activism.
Right.
You know what I mean? Telling these stories is activism. I have to keep telling the stories. I have to be safe to tell the stories. And if they do it here, because the Canadians go, oh, well, we're only 5 years behind the United States in everything that we do. I'm like, fine, then I'll go someplace else. I'm a man without a country. Right?
Wow.
Because if you're going to go after me for being a man, I'll be a man without a country.
Wow. I love
Mhm.
just your artist self kind of already almost finding the schematic of what how powerfully, powerful rhetoric, powerful imagery and stuff, like what an amazing piece that would be. And also, of course, Canada is under attack, by our lunatic in the White House, that this is, this is not just bluster. They're,
Yeah.
Greenland does not play pretend. This 51st state Canada does not play pretend. They are that crazy.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be the first time the U.S. has invaded Canada, and it's never worked out in the past. But I think
Yeah.
that it's actually, to me, not retreating. It's not quitting. It's actually claiming a new bulwark, in a way, to resist from and to engage from. And of course, Toronto is 40 minutes from the border at Buffalo. It's, though now it takes so long to get through,
Yeah,
but
it's 2 hours
um,
now, but
yeah, it used to be so
yeah.
easy. But to me, it's actually a really dynamic, almost the most activist thing you can do right now. And considering the level of violence they ran on trans and immigrant hatred, but they were the two primary things. They literally held the signs up: mass deportation now, stop trans. It wasn't coded. It was part of their bullet points. So I think it's a strong thing. Good for you. I mean, the same way that I think Rosie right now is being the most effective possible art. I think is one of the most effective artists right now from that position of having fled. And that's a rich American tradition of fleeing the insanity of our country. Has been a way that has started to turn the page in virtually every giant social conflict period.
Yeah,
But
and I definitely have had, I thought about Audre Lorde, I thought about James Baldwin,
right,
right? I thought about the people who were, and for similar reasons, they needed, like, our bodies keep the score, right? And when the violence of the rhetoric reached my unconscious, when I was having screaming nightmares about it, I realized, like, I have to take care of this body physically.
right,
I need, and there really is, even though, yeah, I mean, I literally live on the bank of Lake Ontario. I can see America on the other side on a clear day. I'm that close, but uh that buffer is psychically very helpful, you know and it's like, I can't, there's a part of me that wants to just be an artist, right? And it's
right.
like, I can't. That this is the fodder. This is what I'm supposed to be making art about, is this time, um and how we resist and how we persist, right?
Right. I'm so glad I asked you if you were in LA, because I hadn't known about this, and to me it seems super important and at the heart of this time, and certainly to me at the heart of our shared project next weekend on at Seven Stages. That somehow it's all about where do we live, how do we live, how do we preserve embodiment. That I'll carry that into the weekend next week for sure.
Well, please do, because I'm sad that I can't be there. Atlanta is very much my home, and I went to LA to do the TV thing, and to for career reasons,
Right.
but I still, and Seven Stages very specifically is also very much my home. You've always had my back. You were the first to really put me out there and to help my career take the next step. So I'm very much there in spirit, and I wish I could be there in body too.
We'll zoom you in.
Okay.
I do. There's something that is like in my heart to bring to the table quickly. I know we're way past time, but maybe they'll edit. Who knows? Um, as you're talking about the land and telling these stories, of course, here in Georgia, we're on Muskogee Creek land, and really honoring the first people of all of Turtle Island, which is the Americas, including um, all of what our borders don't recognize. And as we're like taking our torch and telling these stories, really honoring what this ground in wherever you are in the Turtle Island, what those stories have to offer, and the courage as we fight and figure out what our home is and what that means. And so, um, I thanks Tim for asking that question and us talking about like the land that we're walking on, and how we are acknowledging the silencing of different voices over generations, and how that continues, which is so important. Um, and even like the inspiration from Shakespeare. Now you're telling your story. Like, I mean, let's go to the roots in all of the different ways. It's beautiful.
I love it.
For some editing purposes, Scott, what's
Yes.
behind you?
So this behind me is the 127 steps. So I'm still like, this is my life's work. What can I say? It's still in progress, and I'm trying to figure out a way to put it all together, so that eventually they will, you see 12 steps in the movie. And so there are 10 times that many, and I need to figure out how to put them all together so folks can explore them and enjoy them eventually.
And also, y'all shared something right when we signed on, but we weren't recording. But as you recall, what are some magic moments of y'all first meeting?
Oh, right, we weren't recording that.
Yeah,
Um,
it was
well,
fun.
I think I told Scott that in my memory, I couldn't remember the date, which Scott had. I think I've been looking for it, but that we met
2002.
at UNC Asheville at they do, I think, still a biannual queer studies conference, and Scott and I were there both performing. I think we were the only two performers, um, and it was certainly the first time I saw Scott perform. Um, I think we performed on the double bill too. I think it was the same night.
We did. Yeah. Yeah. And I
Didn't
remember
we? Yeah,
we
because
did.
I remember those moments where I'm performing and then an audience member, then performing. Um, and so I kind of, for our conversation today, it feels like a perfect space, especially where we ended up just now, kind of that we first encountered each other at a queer citizenship, queer studies conference in beautiful mountainy North Carolina and Asheville. Seemed like it seemed kind of important. The first time you meet anyone, the first meeting is important. Um,
Absolutely.
but I liked that, just to kind of summon that memory of whoever the faculty were, and I don't remember the professors now that were making that happen, but it still happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good sign of life in the embattled higher education. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
that's what.
I remember watching it. I mean, it's like all the memories are coming back, and because I had studied your work, and I it was this, like, they say never meet your heroes, but thank God that I did, and I remember coming away from it feeling like, I think, as trans people talk about having a kind of inner sense of like imposter syndrome all the time anyway, right?
Mm,
But then you layer on top of that being an artist, and kind of like, I'm just up here doing make believe and hopefully like it, and I don't remember exactly. I remember like I remember the feeling of our interaction, but I don't remember like specific things that you said. What I remember is coming away from it feeling like, yeah, I am actually like feeling real, and
mm.
that was so important to me, that in my whole trajectory. So I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for this connection, that we could just continue to circle back to each other.
Oh yeah, there was speaking of circle. I remember there was a moment. I was teaching a performance workshop, I think, but at some
Mhm.
point, it was an amazing group of young queer people mostly from North Carolina. But I really remember the circle in a really beautiful space with windows, and it was such a hopeful, golden kind of, queer positive space. It's the only time I've ever done anything at UNC Asheville, and I'm in North Carolina all the time at other UNC campuses. But it'd be fun to go back. They should bring us back, Scott.
They should. Yeah, if I can be in the United States, we'll see.
I'm like, let's figure out a new work with the two of you. It'll be so fun.
and
That
someone
would be
else, right?
Scott, do you feel you can't leave now because you're in some kind of process in Canada, or is it,
No, I'm honestly
or you just
scared.
feel like you don't want to come, or it's scary to come?
Yeah, it's scary. I don't have my Canadian passport yet. So, if they took away my passport, because they're starting to run this thing about, fraud, right? Like that,
Right.
that my identity is somehow fraudulent. That's how they're doing the Kansas stuff. And the Kansas thing happened overnight. So sorry, my dog, I'll go get him. The Kansas thing happened overnight. And so, it could happen. I could be in the States and they could just say all
Right.
trans passports are invalidated as of tomorrow, right? And I wouldn't have any way to get out. So until I have this other passport, and then even then, I just don't believe that they build ice facilities for one group of people.
Right.
They didn't build concentration camps for one group of people. And trans people, though it's not so prominent in the history, trans people were the first people in concentration camps, and political dissidents and homosexuals and blah, 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 right? Like, we were all there together. So I just don't trust the United States government at all. And I'm if I want my life to be, if I want to stay alive and if I want to stay free so that I can keep telling these stories, I don't believe that the United States is the place where I can do that.
Which is something that is so important for Americans to hear, that actually, oops, I think we froze for a sec. I mean, it's where as you develop this piece, Scott, it's just so important for Americans to, just as my rhetorical flourishes when all of this. Oh, did I freeze or did you freeze? Can you hear me, Heidi?
No, you're okay.
You're
Oh,
fine.
okay. I was seeing images freeze. I think it's really important for Americans to understand that most of the world sees us as the most fucked up industrialized democracy, where we have the least freedom, the least equity. I mean, no one but Americans thinks that, among the first world, industrialized countries. So I think it's really important for Americans to understand just how embarrassing it is to be Americans right now, and has been most of the time.
And that we have this, like, people feel sorry for Americans. When I tell people, they're just like, Canadians do not care that I am trans. Like, that's like not even it's not even a topic. Like, it's wild. It's like Black Mirror. Like, where am I?
Right.
I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. But they are so sorry for me.
There's another good performance section, Scott. Quite funny, the Black Mirror episode.
Well, I mean, to be so close, if I could just jump over the lake, I'm so close, right? Like, and to be so close to the United States, but to be in a place where the social fabric is still intact. They have not wrecked our education and made our children functionally illiterate, right, and are like, they haven't poisoned our minds. Fox News was never allowed to happen here, and the result is astounding. The fact that I can talk to people. There are some people that I have talked to for a whole hour and had a really warm conversation with, who then say, but I guess I would still be a Republican if I was in the United States, because I believe this, and this thing from the like economic standpoint about how you do taxes or whatever. And I'm like, wow, this is like, we can actually still talk to each other, like, it's bizarre. But the number one thing is this pity. They're like, God, I'm just so sorry for what's happened to you.
It's just, I was just in Australia for a month, and people we know there know just what Alice and I went through for 20 years to keep him in the country. But it is literally the universal reaction, some kind of pitying, sad face emoji when if you meet someone on the street, oh, you're from the States, and they go, oh, like it's embarrassing. I'm sorry for you. We feel for you. It's like, it's an amazing response to get, and completely on target and understandable.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should probably not record any more. We could always visit some more, but just to not have too much material to. I don't know, is Debbie going to put this together? Or who's doing it?
Yeah, Debbie will do some editing. I guess I'll just, before we stop recording, so March 14th at 7:30, Tim Miller will be at Seven Stages live performance. Prior to that, during the day, we'll have our service Saturday with different resources like Positive Impact, offering different health testing resources, and Life South Blood Drive, doing a blood drive community experience. There'll be mobile units, and we'll be giving out some free food and clothing, and open mic on the sidewalk in Little Five Points. So come on through. And then Sunday 2:30 to Miller, followed by Scott Turner Schofield's film. We'll be
isn't it 2:00? I thought
2:00. Cool. Yep.
I think so.
Believe it is 2:00.
Go back, say it again, so she can.
We go back and forth between the 2 and 2:30.
I'm pretty sure on the website it says 2.
You're totally right. Okay. So Sunday.
Well, Scott, I have to
Join
get
us.
to Alabama by 6:30, so I'm very aware.
Oh my God. At least you
You
get
Do
just
time.
said I've
Sunday
got from
join
3 to
us.
3:30 and then get on the road. So, oh gosh,
Sunday,
'cause the movie's at
so
3:30.
correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll send you a link.
Sunday, 2 o'clock, Body and the Ode to Miller, followed by the film. And there's always opportunities to engage. Our doors are about having vital conversations beyond the stage and the performances. So we want to connect. All tickets sold have a land use fee that does get donated to our indigenous communities. And we are working with some two feathered organizations and indigenous folks. So come on out. Let's keep telling the stories, friends. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thanks, Heidi.